So this morning, we're going to take out that element of speculation and have direct conversation with our Chief Secretary, the Honourable Farley Augustine. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Good morning, Tobago. Good morning, those of you who might be viewing from all over the world. Share the life, share the life.
That's right. That's right. One more share the life.
Share the life, share the life, share the life.
That's right. Thank you so much, for taking time out your busy schedule to be here with us this morning. And of course, conversations are happening all over, especially with the recent surge in crime on the island. Very saddening position we are in, and I think that it's an anomaly. This has not happened in Tobago as far as I can recall. The amount of murders we've had so far, 10 in 5 months, and also not just murder, gun crime and other types of crime, criminal related activities happening on the island of Tobago. And I know from where you sit, you mentioned on many occasions that the Tobago House of Assembly is restricted in what they can do in terms of, curbing crime. However, there is the opportunity for collaboration with other agencies who are responsible for managing the criminal situation here in Tobago. What has been the conversation with those agencies in terms of a plan? And I know that you are not able to give all the strategies. It doesn't make sense to do so. But in terms of what has the conversation been like, primarily to ensure that our population feels a measure of safety where we are in Tobago?
Well, good morning again. Just yesterday morning, I met with ACP Hazel and also representative of the Defense Force. And that conversation was about rolling out a particular strategy whereby we are able to bring to the Tobago space some specialist units from out of the TTPS. And those specialist units will be resident in Tobago in a permanent way. Usually the strategy is whenever we see a surge, we bring a crew from Trinidad and hot up the place, and then they return. The time has come for us to have these specialist units resident in Tobago. And so we are working that by Monday of next week, we'll have those specialist units resident in Tobago. For that to happen, it means that for us in the THA, we're looking at how we can accommodate them, ensure that there's transportation to have them mobile in and around the island. But that's just part of the conversation. Another part of the conversation is about how we can utilize the Defense Force that's stationed at Camp Signal Hill to do some of the patrols for us. In the past, we used to benefit from something called community comfort patrols. The challenge with the community comfort patrol is that the persons who were employed doing that task, they weren't necessarily precepted. They did not carry arms with them, and so their own safety became a challenge. And so utilizing the Defense Force to do the patrols around the island means that we are coming with some force behind that. But the reason for the patrols is to create a greater sense of confidence, because one will appreciate that crime fighting must happen on several fronts. On one front, we want to apprehend and solve crimes. On another front, we want to be able to prevent crimes from happening, and so we use social intervention strategies for those. But yet on another front, we need to ensure that we create a sense of confidence in the population, because I don't want a Tobago where people end up cowering in a corner, afraid to live, afraid to participate in community activities, afraid to be involved. Because if that happens, there is a detrimental impact on the island's economy. And so we have had those meetings in a quite decisive manner, and the actions are taking place almost immediately where that is concerned. And
we're speaking now about managing a situation that has become out of hand. And I've had a conversation with someone before, and I'm thinking that there's small crimes that we sweep under the carpet. For instance, something as simple as littering. It is a crime. There's a fine attached to it, and sometimes it becomes commonplace because the law isn't necessarily enforced. And so if I can get away with a small crime, I might try a little bigger crime than that, and I might try something. And now here we are in a place where the criminal activities are centered around drug trafficking and guns and all of these things that now end up in termination of life. And so we have to speak now to the conversation of enforcing the laws that are in place to curb and to govern the nation and the island and the people of Tobago. And we're also talking about behavioral changes. You mentioned community involvement, and I believe that will be a part of how our behaviors will change. And how do we speak to now ensuring that even the smallest of the law is enforced to so that people will know, I can't get away with a small crime, so let me not even try a big crime.
Well, it's interesting that you raised that. Some years ago, former President, His Excellency A.N.R. Robinson, famously said that bad habits gather in degrees, streams into rivers into seas. In other words, it grows over time, and it might start as a little ripple, a little drop in the ocean, but essentially it becomes wider and wider. The ripple effect becomes wider and wider and wider. And so when I addressed the island last week, Friday, and I proposed that we need to move ahead with a localized police force. It is to be able to treat some of those very smaller issues, because I spoke about a localized police force to treat issues such as the litter wardens, forest management, lifeguards, traffic management, and so on. And what that does is it allows us to have a specialist type unit treating with what people might term small issues, while we reserve the TTPS, what we call the big issues. And you would appreciate that in the TTPS in Tobago at present, we do in fact have a manpower shortage in terms of the numbers. And it is also literally a manpower shortage as well, which is a condition that we have to have as an island. And perhaps we should have ACP Hazel speak more to that. But when you see the recruiting process cannot find suitably qualified men in Tobago, that is a challenge that we have to contend with in terms of human resource capital to be deployed in crime fighting. But even before we get to that stage, prevention of criminal activity starts with us in the community, and it starts with social behaviors and how we change those. It starts with the sort of education that happens in our social institutions, starting with the very first of them, which is the home, and what happens in that space. It speaks to how do we coordinate a response that includes our churches and religious organizations, churches, mosques, and so on. How do we coordinate a response that includes our sport groups? For example, I can recall when I was vice president of Sidis Football Club, one of the things that we insisted on is during the season, we will not provide even alcohol for any of our social activities during the season. End of season is a different story. But, it's about creating a sense of discipline. I even remember another strategy we had in that club was that we provided free extra lessons for members of the club and their family, extra lessons in math and English and social studies and basic subjects. And so we had the young men and their girlfriends and their sisters and their mothers coming to classes for free on some of their off days. The point I'm making is that we have to utilize these social institutions in a way that allows us to re-educate the community, that allows us to make good citizens out of individuals and overall create social cohesion, because that I think is what is critical in this fight. Yes, we have the TTPS which will come with all the heavy power. We must also have the social intervention strategies, and of course we can't overstate the strategies required in terms of border control, and the fact that our borders are porous and anybody could practically just sail in here anytime unnoticed. Anything could get into our shores. That has to be treated with, because we don't manufacture guns in Tobago.
That's right.
We don't manufacture guns in Trinidad. It's not being sold in the supermarket shelf. I don't even know if there is even a gun store in Tobago that someone with an FUL can go and purchase a firearm legally in Tobago. But we have so much of it on our streets, all illegal, and it's not just some Oh, apologies. That's the alarm telling me 7:45, and not just crappy guns we are seeing. What we're seeing is high-powered rifles being utilized. Those are being imported. Those are coming through our borders. Those are making their way into the hands of young people and being utilized by young people. And so we have to fix our borders and protect and lock down our borders in a much more strategic and efficient manner if it is we are to realize some results when it comes to crime.
And, you know, that conversation is very important. And when Superintendent Roland Kirk was here yesterday, we also brought that conversation up as well. Our borders, we really have to do something about it. And so now we're waiting now to see the transition from conversation into implementation. And you did mention from on Monday morning, we're going to have that specialized Tobago police unit implemented. So that is good news. And we're happy to hear that. And so as the conversation continues, we're looking for, okay, we've had the conversation, we came to an agreement, we've put the strategies in place, let us implement. Now, I know these things are not free. There's a cost attached to everything that we want to implement. I want to feel safe in my yard. I want to feel safe when I'm walking to work or driving to work. I want to feel safe in the supermarket. So do you and your family. And so we have to make a demand for these things, but they do have a cost. And this leads me into my next line of questioning. I know that you've had challenges. You've mentioned the challenges in terms of the relationship with central government and the Tobago House of Assembly. One, in not, of course, meeting the budgetary requirements, a request from the THA, and also two, the fact that the funds come behind time, they come late and they don't come in the expected amounts that you are hoping for. How are we proposing to finance this new Tobago policing thing and also all the other initiatives that we want to put in place in terms of ensuring that Tobago is a safe space?
And so there are two areas that we have to look at based on your question. In the first instance, an immediate instance, we are looking at existing specialized units within the TTPS that we are going to have resident in Tobago. And so what we propose to do, we have already identified via the TTPS, they have identified a location for which they will be temporarily housed. And while that is happening, we are having the repurposing, the refitting, the retrofitting of an old government quarters to be able to house those two specialized units in a much more permanent way. So we will have to expend some funds in paying rent at least for 3 to 6 months, but we just can't wait until we finish doing the work. We have already had URP and some of the workers in the Department Division of Infrastructure beginning work on retrofitting and rehabilitating the government quarters to facilitate these two specialist units, but we cannot wait on that work to be completed before they could start working in Tobago. We need them like yesterday. And so the executive has taken a decision that we will rent for these two specialist units in the interim. With regards to this, the localized Tobago force, police force that we have been asking for a very long time, and I've said I am not the originator of this idea. This was first brought to the House by Mr. London and sent down to Parliament while Mr. Manning was Prime Minister. So you could well count the number of years. In fact, I was not even in politics when that went down. I was probably a student still when that was sent down. But the point is, I'm not the originator of the idea, but it is absolutely useful and critical. And so currently we are preparing for our budget in the month of June. By law, we are required to present our budget and submit to the Ministry of Finance in the month of June. And so in our budget allocations for fiscal 2025, we are going to put measures in it to be able to pay for this localized police force. And that will be our signal to the central government that, look, we are not just saying we want this, but we want you to budget for it in fiscal 2025, which will begin in October of this year. That's when the fiscal year begins, in October. So in October of this year. So it's going to be in our estimates, the THA estimates, as we will send to central government for fiscal 2025 to be able to accommodate this specialized unit.
And a good way to segue into a short break this morning. We're going to continue conversations this morning with our Chief Secretary, and you want to stay on for this conversation. You see so much information is coming out this morning. We have to go for a quick break, and when we go for a break, of course, we invite you to help us. Share the live, share the live, share the live. We'll be right back.